Rather than just introduce them one at a time, I'm going to have them all come out at once and find their seats, and then we'll talk about it.
Special congressional hearing. It's like the UN.
Okay, now you have the second group. No, we don't have that. First of all, everyone having a great time at Pensacon so far? Well, let's go down the line and see who we've got here first. He was the voice of fighter pilot Wedge Antilles in A New Hope. Also, you heard him on the planet Yavin PA in Rogue One. This is David Ankrum. Hello. We have Wedge Antilles' original voice. How about Wedge Antilles himself? Denis and Lawson. Yeah, he knows he's going to always be known as Punk on Bus in Star Trek 4, but he's done so much more, and Jabba's palace would not have been the same without being populated by his work in Creatures. An Emmy winner for Muppets Tonight. It's Kirk Thatcher. One of the crew that made Jabba the Hutt so lovely and appealing. He's also worked on The Dark Crystal, Never-Ending Story, Jez Gibson-Harris. He created the marvelous evil cackle of Jabba's henchman, Salacious Crumb, as well as voices of Ewoks in The Battle for Endor and Scavengers in The Force Awakens. It's Mark Dodson. Well, while he was cackling, someone had to make Salacious Crumb move, so he also worked on Dark Crystal, Never-Ending Story, as well as Jim Henson's Creature Shop, Michale McCormick. He operated Max Rebo of the Max Rebo Blues Band and in Jabba's Palace and Jedi. He was also the Gamorrean guard who gets eaten by the Rancor pit monster. He looks delicious, Simon Williamson. Come on, man, he's BB-8. He also operated some of the Porgs on Luke's Island, did some work in Solo and Rogue One, Brian Herring. Hello. And you've seen him recently on 911, Veep, Scandal, and also in The Mandalorian. It's Dominic Pace. Gentlemen, welcome again. Some of you are returning guests at Pensacon. It's great to see you again. If we can start down over there, way down there with Deb, just tell us how you got involved in that planet and galaxy far, far away.
Well, I was an actor in the 60s in Hollywood, and 70s, 80s. I had become friends with the casting director, Fred Roos, who cast American Graffiti. And he cast me in a couple of films. Every Little Crooked Nanny, I don't know if anybody knows that one, but so he had me come in and read for, they said, some robot creature. So it was, I guess, turned out to be C-3PO. And so months later, I came back and got an incredible lot and voiced Wedge. So in A New Hope. So it's kind of amazing. It's kind of amazing to be sitting up next to him, actually. Pretty good. So that's my story. It's a very short story.
Dennis, what's your origin story?
What's my story?
Your origin story.
My origin story.
Yes.
Well, I was born at an early age. Well, I 76. We made the first one. You know, I met George with a whole bunch of other actors, and I always heard that he gave his marks out of 10 because he met so many people. I don't know. I got 3 out of 10 or something. I can't remember. But anyway, I was quite busy that year. I made a couple of movies in France, funnily enough, and then yeah, they came up with this movie, this Star Wars thing, and nobody knew what it was. Nobody had any expectations of it. It was great fun. There was a lot of young actors kicking off, as I was, in a sense, so we had a very good time on it, but had no real concept of what we were involved in at all, until we saw, I remember watching it, as you all have, for the very first time, and that opening shot of that ship going across the top of the camera, and it was gobsmacking. at the time, because they broke so much ground technically on that film. And we realised from that point we were involved in something very special, but of course didn't realise it was going to explode across the galaxy.
Kirk, what about some of your work that we saw on stage, but not you?
Oh, yeah, so, jeez, I'm sorry. I'm so used to yelling because the din at the convention hall. My mom came home from church, I was 14, and said I met someone whose son worked on Star Wars, and I was a huge Star Wars fan. It had just come out like 3 months earlier. It was Joe Johnston, and I grew up near Van Nuys, where the original ILM was, and so I met Joe, who was very sweet to me, gave me a tour, and I said, I want to work on Star Wars. He said, well, and I was drawing and making models and things like that, so I kept in touch with him. I graduated high school that summer. I went and visited ILM, and I made this big rubber monster for a movie I'd done, and I was an idiot, so I'm like, here, I made this, do you want it? And he said, sure, kid. So they were hiring for, George wanted to have a creature shop in Marin, as well as London, and so they were hiring, and because most of the creature builders in LA didn't want to move up to Marin County for 2 years, they were kind of hiring anybody who knew anything, because I had self-taught how to make molds and cast rubber and paint and all that, so they hired me. I went and interviewed. This is the short version, but basically I called Joe after a year at UCLA or a quarter and said, hey, I hear they're doing the new Star Wars movie, I will make coffee and sweep floors. And he said, I just put your name on the list for the creature crew. I said, you're kidding? He said, no. So I went up, interviewed, and got the job at 18 years old, and worked on all the creatures in Jabba's palace except for Jabba, because he was all done in London.
That was the post-exam version. Very good. I like that. Jez, how about you?
Well, I was a rookie as well, and I started at art college doing jewelry and silversmithing, and I had a very a lucky break into the industry. I met someone at a bus stop, and it sounds very dubious, but we'd done a primary school together, so I done a primary school with this guy, so that's when you're between, in the UK, it's between when you're 6 and 11. And we recognised each other, and we'd just seen Alien. And he said, oh, you should come and see what we're doing at the studio. And he just finished work on Empire Strikes Back, making Yoda, with another guy called Nick Maley. And they just formed a new company together. And I did some work with him for a year. And my second film happened to be Dark Crystal, where I met Simon and several other guys who were here, Mike. And we had just happened to be in the same studios as the Star Wars was kicking off, and I managed to get in there and speak to Stuart Freeborn, who was running the shop. And we had Kirk's model of Jabba, and from then on, we worked on Ewoks, and then we recreated the Jabba full size for Kirk's lovely model.
Phil Sculptor, I just molded it. But I wish this guy. So we've never met before. We both are in the same movie, the same kind of job. Today.
Mark?
Get your handkerchiefs out.
Mark, how about you?
My turn. Well, since you mentioned the bus stop, I actually met I met Ian Bryce and several people from Lucasfilm at the Banjo Cafe in Santa Monica. I had just moved out to Los Angeles from St. Louis. I grew up in St. Louis. And right out of high school, I wanted to be a director-producer. I was a big fan like you all, and I was always a fan of the directors. I loved Hitchcock, Chaplin, Peckinpah, Mel Brooks. I loved their stuff, and I wanted to be a director. And so I went to LA right out of high school. And my thing was, I will empty trash cans, I will do whatever it takes to get in the business. And you know, I'll meet people, and when something opens up, someday I'm going to be a director. Well, what actually came along was that Ian and everyone, we became friends, and they were working for Lucasfilm. Ian was parking cars at the Egg Company, was what it was called, which was the facilities in Los Angeles across from Universal Studios. And they knew that I was, looking, anything you guys can get me in there. He said, hey, they're moving us to Marin County. Right now they're just looking for laborers and carpenters. And I said, well, I could labor, I'm sure I could do that. And he said, would you do that? And I said, yeah, and then if something opens up in production, eventually maybe I can get over there. So I did. I went up there. I was laboring. I always did impersonations as a kid, for fun. And one day, honestly, I was working. Some of the guys were walking through. I was working on the building in what was called the Kerner Company in San Rafael, which was ILM actually. And somebody didn't understand something, and I loved Strother Martin. And I said, what we have here is a failure to communicate. and there was some sound guy, and I didn't know it, I really didn't. He goes, that's a good Strother Martin. And I was like, thanks. And he said, can you do others? And I said, yeah. So I did a few more. I did Bela Lugosi and the people I grew up on, Boris Karloff. And he said, you should let Ben Burke know that you can do this. He's always looking for voices. So I did. I let him know. And he said he would have me over sometime. So they moved me to the ranch. We had finished the work in San Rafael. I get a call to come over. I went in to read to try out for Admiral Akbar. I became so nervous that I started shaking, and there was no place to set the script. And I'm in the studio now that I had built, or labored on, and I'm shaking, and I went, oh my God. And Ben's like, what's wrong? And I said, I'm so nervous, I'm shaking so bad I can't even read this, because I'm like, trying to see it. And he says, oh, just relax. I said, let me get rid of these nerves, and for some reason, he said, go ahead. I walked away from the mic, and I started going, and I walked back, and I'm like, okay, I'm ready. I had stopped shaking. He comes out from behind his podium. He says, give me that script. And I gave him the script, and I really thought I had offended Ben Burke. I thought, oh man, I just blew it. But he got back around the podium, and he said, you know what you just did over there? And I was like cackling and that. He said, yeah. He said, I've got a creature that's going to be perfect for her. We're going to forget Admiral Akbar, and we're going to do a whole bunch of that today. That's how.
You didn't have to memorize lines, at least.
No, I outlived the whole thing. He told me a story about this. He described the creature, Salacious. I never did see him until we screwed the movie. He described him, and then he gave me situations. He said, you're sneaking up to you're in the desert, you're sneaking up to a giant's castle. Give me some sounds in that voice. And so I just got to, you know, and doing these. And then he's like, okay, give me a bunch of cackles, give me laughs, bigger, faster, you know, all different things. I will tell you that the scene where Salacious takes C-3PO's eye, I'm sorry, Anthony, he was upset about that. Really what I'm saying is give me back my cheese. But he goes to he gets zapped in the butt and goes up to the rafters and yells down. And Ben had said, well, you just stole this giant's cheese. And now he just grabbed you and took the cheese out of your hand. Tell him you want the cheese back in gibberish. So actually what I'm thinking to get that emotion was, give me back that cheese.
Okay, Michael, how'd you get into that? For some reason, I've heard a lot of cheese stories in this convention from some of us. Michael, now you were making Salacious move, weren't you? Weren't you making the Salacious move during the...
The Salacious Crumb thing is an interesting saga. You can take it wherever you like. Tony McVeigh and I had been working in London on Dark Crystal, and talked to Stuart Freeborn, so on and so forth, and all of a sudden I'm in San Rafael, and trying to make the elephant Ephod guy, you're right, the big one that nobody knows he's in there. He's in one scene very quickly. But it was sort of my duty to make these puppets work. And it's funny looking back. It's fun stuff. But the elephant guy I'm doing it was a really big, cumbersome man in a suit kind of thing. Built a carrying rig that was actually like a steady cam unit for this puppet to hang off the front of. Very heavy face and head. And so he couldn't move very well. And I thought, what he needs, he's not very interesting. He looks good, but he can't do anything. He can't tap dance or, he probably weighed 400 pounds. And so I thought, well, it needs some kind of point, staccato point. So I went to Tony and said, Tony, can you do something between a lizard and a monkey? Okay. And Salacious sort of evolved. 3 days later, we had him. George was coming down to take a look at the puppets and see if things were moving, and he walked in, and here's this elephant guy that is consuming 3/4 of the room. And he said, oh, Phil Tippett's gotta be really mad, because I don't think we can use him in the scene, he's too big. But who's that little guy sitting on his arm? And our careers were made. Yeah, that's actually, somebody was filming that. There's actually talk about, you get to look at your own moment of glory, and but it was very, very interesting the way that whole thing worked. And we had a show and tell. There were a bunch of the big people coming through, a real dog and pony show. And I was sort of rigging tungsten wires on size noodles. I'd done her nose, so she was doing her thing. And the table tipped, and I started falling. And I thought, do I want to fall through all these tungsten cheese slicing wires? And I thought, no, so I threw myself off to one side, got my arm stuck in these metal shelves, and basically broke my shoulder. So, and that's why I gave Tim Rose a call to take my place performing the puppet but they had my best interests at heart. They did a good job.
Tim did Admiral Akbar too, didn't he? Yeah. Well, Simon, you kind of multitasked in that scene, didn't you?
Yeah. Well, I started out as an actor in London, looking for work in theatre mostly, thinking I might have a shot at TV, never really thinking about film. And there was a weekly newspaper called The Stage, which had a few adverts in the back, notorious for having virtually nothing for actors. They're mainly telesales job. But one week there was an advert that said, HO, H-O exclamation mark, the Henson organisation are making a film, The Dark Crystal, we want equity actors, dancers, acrobats and mimes. And then the way that it described the film didn't make sense at all. I thought it might be building giant pyramids, human pyramids with about 6 or 8 people. But I went to the audition, and there were several more follow-up auditions, and I got to know what it was about, and we tried on the top half of a mystic costume. Got to realise the Henson organisation was the Muppet people, and I got the job, along with about 9 other people, playing a whole range of creatures, and worked on the film for 6 months, rehearsing and working with the designers to make sure that these wonderfully designed creatures could actually be performed by a human, and then we shot for 5 months. And after that, at the same studio, Elstree, Return of the Jedi was starting, so I got a call saying, would I like to be a puppeteer on this film? And didn't have to audition, and that was Return of the Jedi. And I had a great time doing that. And the first scenes were Jabba the Hutt's palace, and we were all assigned a creature to puppeteer. And I wasn't Max Rebo originally. I was a character called 6-6, who was a rather a slug-like creature on the floor in Jabba the Hutt's palace with 6 eyes, 3 red eyes on one side of the snout and 3 eyes on the other side. And I think there was a kind of disagreement between George Lucas and Richard Marquand over whether the character should stay in the shot or not. One liked it and one didn't. And then Phil Tippett came up and said, would you like to play this character? And showed me this blue elephant with 2 legs. And I thought, yes please, I'd love to play him. Because he's bright blue in the middle of a set that's murky and dark with a lot of smoke around. So that's how I got Max Rebo and extended my contracts on the film to play various Gamorrean guards and did some puppeteering on 9 Nuns, Eye Blinks, and a couple of characters who didn't survive into the final film. 10 Num, so obviously a bit like 9 Num, only different, and Ernie Akbar, who was another calamari, and I played a sort of bog standard calamari man as well.
Ryan, you're kind of in charge of one of the most popular new characters, aren't you?
Yes.
How'd you get that gig?
I have been working as a puppeteer since about 1992, and I did a film with Neil Scanlon, who's the head of the creature shop, a thing called Prometheus for Ridley Scott. And several years later, I rang Neil for some reason. I was looking at somebody's phone number, and he called me up and asked me what I was up to. And I wasn't particularly busy, and I was just chatting away, and I said, I knew Star Wars was coming back, but we didn't know who was doing it. And I said, and now I'm going to find out who's got the Star Wars script and kick his door in. And Neil said, well, don't do that, I like the door where it is. And he said, don't worry, I'll find you something. And Neil hired me as the puppeteer consultant for the whole of the Force Awakens, so I was in with him early on, finding performers and just casting people and just working out how we could make certain things work. And then these drawings of this little round thing, at the time it was called Snow Globe, started to arrive, and a very clever man called Josh Lee was kind of looking as BB-8's dad. He was put in charge of mechanising these drawings and trying to realise it. So he gave me a puppet about this big with a little polystyrene body, and I had this little head that would turn. And I was wearing black, and we shot it against the black velvet on the tabletop, just to see what kind of a character study we could get as to how you could make a ball with half a ball act. So we shot some stuff and we sent it off to JJ, and JJ really liked it. And from there, Matt and Josh and Giles, they built 7 different versions of BB-8, and I brought on my friend Dave Chapman, and we worked together to find a character for it, and that all led up to one very, very stressful show and tell for JJ, because JJ and Kathy, they never really bothered Neil, they just trusted him to get on with it. And then there was this one particular day where we had to show all of the BB-8s, and that day the whole thing could have gone digital like that. But luckily JJ just fell in love with it immediately, and he said to us, we love how you're doing this, you're in the movie. So then we had to go off and read it, and we didn't know what the story was at the time, so Dave and I sat down and we had to give our cell phones in, and we got our big black bound books with red pages, and we opened the first page and it said Star Wars Episode 7. Okay, this is exciting. And we started to read the script, and we realised he wasn't just in it a bit, he was in it all the way through. And that was when we started to panic. But we were really lucky, and it went all right, didn't it? It went okay.
Well, Dominic, sorry, we're out of time.
Oh, that's it. Thank you.
All right, Gecko, Bounty Hunter. How'd you get involved with Mandalorian?
I've been a character actor for 20 plus years, and always went by the advice of Bryan Cranston and the late Philip Seymour Hoffman, take everything. I had previous prosthetic experience on Van Helsing. I doubled and stood in for Frankenstein opposite Hugh Jackman. I also had a few featured bits on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and then also Bright. I was one of the orcs with Will Smith. I got called in by a gentleman, just an incredible prosthetic gentleman with a company called Legacy Effects, and his name was Brian Sipe. And I sat in the chair for 6 hours, and he split my face in two between prosthetics and makeup, and this was 2 weeks prior to production in 2018. And I've been a diehard Star Wars fan my whole life. You can YouTube Dominic Pace Entertainment Tonight. I was a collector before Episode 1 came out. I just was giddy. I had a film coming out with Miramax, and just been a collector like so many of you. I got called in 2 weeks later for a project called Huckleberry. And like so many of you, as opposed to just an acting opportunity or a performance opportunity, when I saw Lucasfilm at the top of the contract and the agreement, my hands went numb. And it went even more numb when on day one, George Lucas was there talking with Jon Favreau over the history of Mandalorians. Brian came to me, there were 3 options of this bounty hunter. 2 of them were masked, and he said, you had so much patience in the chair, I want to give you this very unique look. He worked on a Greenpeace project 2 years prior from a model that was similar to a gecko. And I did the screen test for John and Dave, and I got a couple of snickers from some of the other bounty hunters. I said, well, what's so funny? They said, well, the bumps kind of look like boobs on your head. so I went to Brian right before we were filming first day Monday, and I said, Brian, 6'4", I have like this shape of like Jason from Friday the 13th. I said, you can make it like a little more, badass. I mean, it's a bounty hunter. So we put some horns on it. We're in episode 1 and 3. My mother is here today from New York. My mother, she raised me as a single mother. We didn't have much money, and one of my first play sets was a cantina play set. So you can imagine on day 1, walking in to this set with George Lucas there to be one of the creatures. Again, it's less of an acting accolade and more of just a fan experience where I can't tell you how grateful I am to John and Dave for this opportunity. I've been working very close. I'm doing a 19-city tour because of the fans. Little side characters have become so popular. The 1985 series with Prune Face and Yak Face and the Blue Snaggletooth. It's just amazing, the outpouring of support for something. I think I had maybe a minute screen time, even in episode 3 and 1 of The Mandalorian. But I've been working very closely with the 501st and The Mandalorian Mercs. People are asking me if I'll be in season 2. There's a few exciting things coming up I can't announce. But just this in and of itself, just to show my gratitude. I know how many fans would be so grateful to even have this one opportunity. I've been just working so close with those charitable organizations and so much of the good that they do throughout the communities on this 19-city tour to just give back and to send my thanks to John, Dave, and Deborah Chow for even just to be a one-of-a-kind bounty hunter, one-of-a-kind species. We're hoping to get an action figure, but just an absolute dream come true.
Everyone can have a job with an action figure. That would be great. We have 2 microphones up. If you have any questions, I know we don't have much time because we have so many guests here, but I would love to hear your questions. I'm sure they would too. But as such a fan of the series for so long, and I am going to pump you for